Kia ora tātou, o piki mai, kake mai, whakatau mai rā, kua tatu nei koutou, ngau mai, haere mai, whakatau mai rā. Ki aku nui, ki aku rahi, ngā mana whenua o tēnei rohe, rauranga tira mā, tauira tāwhito mā, aku hoa mahi, ngā manuhiri kua tai mai nei mo tēnei kaupapa, ngā mihi tino nui ki a koutou. Ko waio, ko Kylie Quince tōku ingoa, he uri o ngā puhi Ngāti Porou, me Ngāti Kahununu. Ko au te tumuake o te kura ture o tēnei wānanga, nō reira e mihi ana ki a koutou katoa. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out to join us on a pretty wild and wet late night, close to the beginning of winter. So thank you so much for coming to join us. As I've just said, my name's Kylie Quince. I'm the Dean of the School of Law here at AUT, so welcome and thank you for joining us. So I welcomed my colleagues, current students, past students, prospective students by the look of it, and a number of alumni amongst you. So welcome back to those of you who have a relationship with AUT. Welcome to those of you who would maybe like a relationship with AUT. It's really great to see you here tonight. So obviously the clue is on the slide here. So we're here, of course, as part of the Great Graduates Speakers Series. So periodically we bring back some of our alumni to chat, to have a kōrero, to hear from them about what they've been doing since they've left us. And tonight we've got one of those graduates. So this is Angee Nicholas. So the purpose of tonight is for us to hear from her, both about her journey coming to AUT, what that was like studying here as a student, and of course what she's done since. And Angee's had a pretty varied and interesting career across a number of different spheres in the years since she's left us. So welcome again, thank you very much. We're just going to get straight into the kōrero, and then we've got maybe 30 or 40 minutes of me asking some questions of Angee. I hope you don't feel like you're under cross-examination. And then we'll open the floor, and hopefully people from the floor will have questions too. So nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. So let's get to it. Kia ora. Right, we'll start at the beginning, I suppose. So I'll give you a chance, Angee, to introduce yourself. So ngau mai hoki mai ki tō kura ture. Welcome back to your law school and your university. It's great to see you. So why don't you just tell us, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and where you come from.
Yeah. Thank you, Kylie. And thank you everyone for coming tonight. This is really just a real privilege, of course, to be here and to be a part of this great speaker series. Tōku ingoa ko Angee. It's my niece over here waving to me, which is quite cute. I was born in the Cook Islands in 1993, and that gives away my age. And then roughly around 1999, 2000s, my family and I moved to New Zealand, and ever since then have lived out in West Auckland. So raised in West Auckland, went to AUT, of course, and graduated with my law degree in 2018. My mum, I do want to introduce you to a small pocket of my family. My family are quite large, but who are here tonight. So to my left, I have my mum, who is here in support, and then Sammy in the middle, and my cousin Lorraine. Also, obviously, I can introduce probably everyone in this room, but thank you very much for coming tonight. They are my biggest support. Shall I share a bit about my childhood? I
Sure.
guess. Shall I? Anyone here from out West Auckland? So, aside from me. Right, so I attended the local schools there. If you've heard of Ranui Primary, St. Dominic's College. So it's great to see some young people here tonight. Do consider AUT, I would highly recommend it. But I've got an older sister, the youngest of two, and I guess we'll get more into what happened following my graduation from AUT.
Sure. So tell me about, was university always on the cards for you? Were you the first in your whānau to come to university, and why? Why did you choose to study law?
Yeah, so Dad went to uni, but I would be the first to finish and graduate with a law degree. So after finishing high school, I wasn't too sure actually what it was I wanted to do. I had an idea, but because I felt so unsure, is this something that I really want to get into, I took a gap year. So I took a gap year, worked in a few different roles, and just took time to consider what I really wanted to do the following year. And so I went to some open days. I went to Auckland Uni. Yes, I went to Auckland Uni, and then I also attended the AUT Open Day, and I absolutely loved it, just in a nutshell. I enjoyed the orientations that I was a part of. I love the culture and the people, of course, that I managed to connect with during those open days. So law was something that was always on the cards for me. I thought about it as a young kid, as a child growing up, you know, especially someone who was born overseas, and to have parents who really spoke into those dreams, you know, just dream big, go really big, and they encouraged me to pursue things like, you know, why don't you consider becoming a lawyer? And I was like, I don't even know what I thought back at that time actually, but they spoke that into me, just dream big and to go for it. And they ended up at AUT Law School.
What kind of knowledge, it's maybe important for the school students here, what kind of knowledge of or encounters with the law had you had before coming to university?
I'm going to backtrack slightly to when I was maybe a teenager, because my view of the law was very limited. Like I had barely any encounter with it up until I started studying at AUT Law, and then I ended up working for some members of parliament. And so I worked so closely with them that I got to see exactly what that looked like, what the life of an MP looked like. And so I think for me, the real encounter with the law / politics started then. Yeah.
I came to law school because I thought I was going to be rich. So you can scrub that from your mind. That's highly unlikely unless you go into private law perhaps. But yeah. Tell me about once you came to university, what were the challenges, what were the highlights?
I guess several challenges. I mean, number one is trying to get over the fact that you're studying law, and it was just a really difficult, I guess, journey for me. I found it difficult to get a handle of some of the things that the law taught you and offered. And, you know, come the end of the degree, you're like, I can't believe I graduated and I got through all of that. So it was challenging, and it is, and people say that before you undergo studies, you know, a law degree, it's challenging. And there are a lot of readings, a lot of concepts, principles to get your mind around, but yeah, thankfully I did it. So some of the challenges, I think more specifically, is obviously the degree itself is challenging, but it's a good challenge. You know, when it comes to thinking about challenges, it's also an opportunity. You can think of it as a challenge, and at the time I did, but it can also be a great opportunity for you to learn and to get a handle of things. The other thing was the transition from high school. Though I didn't go straight into AUT, I still found it a bit tricky just to get my head around that I'm actually responsible for my studies. And I didn't have a teacher that was always there to run after me or follow up on me. So I had that. And then I guess just really figuring out my place at AUT Law. I found it really useful actually to further down the track connect with some really awesome people and some of the clubs that were available that really fostered, I guess, my growth at AUT Law.
So I remember when I arrived at AUT, you were near the end of your degree, and at that time we had the combined student association, so the Māori and Pacific Law Students Association, MAPLA, which are now two separate associations. So tell me what kind of help was that to you? Or how did that benefit you and others?
Yeah, well, there was a lot of academic support that came through those associations. Networks that you were able to build within the university externally as well. That was super helpful. But I suppose in building a great person, like just building those connections with the various law students, really fostered my leadership. I went from being, I don't want to know anyone, or I don't want to talk to anyone, really, or engage in classes, to doing the very opposite. So it helped me incredibly when I was in law school, and I didn't realize that actually until, I don't think I chose to become a part of those associations, but it was almost forced at my own will to join the exec at that time, yeah.
When you did graduate, did you feel, and you've just told us that you did have that gap year between school and university, so you had done some work, you had some work experience, but once you graduated, and often school leavers won't often have any work experience prior to graduating, did you feel well prepared for work? How could you be better prepared, do you think?
It's true. I did have a bit of work experience, so because I'd also taken a gap year, and like I was a youth worker, I worked at Harcourts, can't remember what else that I did, but I tried to do as much as possible to fill that year. Well, following graduation, did you mean? Well, my story is different because, again, I feel like gap years are a thing in my story. But when I graduated, I was obviously proud, and I could see the pride on my parents' faces, of course, that I had graduated with my law degree. So in that way, I felt extremely proud to see them like that. But again, I took almost like a gap year, and I thought I'm done, and I'm not going to do any legal practice whatsoever, because I found the journey obviously challenging, exciting. Look, I make it sound really bad, but it's challenging, but it's exciting. But I just thought at the time, it's probably not for me. So I kind of took a gap year. Once I had finished, I did profs because I thought that was a natural progression. So I did my profs, admitted to the bar, but I stayed working with MPs at the time. Yeah.
Good. Once you were, so we'll come to politics in a minute, but once you're you did some legal practice of a kind, you worked in quite a variety of places. Once you're out, you obviously get to see people who've graduated from other, not just law schools, but other universities. Yeah. Is there sort of a stamp or a way in which you felt that AUT graduates are different? You know, what makes an AUT education identifiable, I suppose?
Yeah. To me, there is it's almost like, I think the standout character for me is there's a sense of humility. Like when you come past AUT graduates, I mean, I met Mark tonight. It's just the way that they speak. You know, that culture that was cultivated during university days. There's a real collegiality and humility around some of the students that you speak to from AUT Law School and also AUT as a university. And for me, actually, personally, that was the standout thing. And that's why I went with AUT, because I thought there was just something different about the people and the place that attracted me to it. Yeah. And it's still the same today. Still the same today. Yeah.
So I know that one of the jobs you've had since graduating is work with the Royal Commission on Abuse and State Care and the Pacific team. Yeah. Now that's winding up now, and final reports are due shortly. Yeah. But obviously the kaupapa, the purpose of that, the subject matter, pretty traumatic. You are dealing with incredibly sensitive information, people who have terrible histories of victimisation. So tell us a bit about working for the Royal Commission, and I particularly want to know how do you cope and deal with, how do you keep yourself safe in that kind of environment?
Yeah, I was really fortunate. So I sort of skipped that part, didn't I, Kylie? So once I had, basically, I thought a little bit about practicing, and I didn't want my law degree to go to waste, in the sense that I actually wanted to get in to the legal work. So I applied to the Royal Commission, so obviously worked there for a little bit in the abuse and care inquiry, and I was fortunate to be in the Pacific team, and I worked with some awesome lawyers there, you know, two who have gone on to become judges, and so, you know, that experience, I was like, I cannot believe I was in this space, like, you know, and you know, I was at Manukau Courts, and Her Honour Judge Sharkey was there, and I thought, oh, we did the little wave, because, you know, there are certain things that you have to do, but we did the little wave, and she was like, it's really good to see you, counsel, and I'm like, oh, see, like, those things for me, those connections that you build are just amazing. But how do I keep myself safe? Well, I had a really good team. They looked after me quite well, and they looked after the newbies, basically, the new lawyers that had come in and walked with us. There was a lot of support that was available through the commission, like, you know, supervision, etc., that we could get access to. But it was quite hard. It was hard because the nature of the work, and it was difficult to reach some of the contents of the abuse that took place, and I was never exposed to that kind of stuff. That was my first exposure to that kind of content. Yeah, so it was an eye-opening experience for me. Yeah.
You've mentioned a couple of times already that politics has played a big part in your life, both before university and since, and as people probably know, so you've had involvement with the National Party for some time now, and stood as a candidate in the election just passed. So tell us a bit about your foray into politics, and where you, particularly how does that, the relevance of a legal education to that sphere, I suppose.
Yeah. A lot of people used to say to me, well, you'd be great because, you know, you did a law degree. And I was like, oh, okay. But I never thought of it in that way. And it is actually quite helpful. But my entry into politics, so I'm not here to persuade anyone on any sort of party, but my dad loved politics. I did not growing up. I stayed away from it completely because I thought, well, if this is what politics looks like, that's not something I want to be a part of. But again, you know, relationships are crucial when you go through a journey, you know, going through university, etc., because you build friendships and relationships with people who may be very important to you further down the track. And that's how my journey started in politics. I knew a few people in the party and who I walked with, and so they helped me consider politics a bit further down the track.
You came really close, so close you went down to Wellington, and it's a close but no cigar. So tell us about, and that's obviously a pretty big setback. So how did you manage that? How do you cope with something like that, which is obviously disappointing?
Yeah, extremely disappointing. And like you said, so what happened was, because it's only me and my mum who are here from West Auckland, so I ran in the seat of Te Atatū, and I chose that seat because I grew up there over 20 years. And so what happened was, so I went down to Parliament. I won on election night, but it was by a narrow margin of 30. So I knew it was going to be a close run. I knew it was going to be really, really close, but inductions started for us new MPs 3 weeks into the job, and then of course special votes came, and the disappointing news of losing by 131. Yeah. So how do I manage it? Well, you just have to go through the motions. You have to accept that it was disappointing, and figure out where exactly, and this is what I did. I had to figure out, right, what is it that I want to do next? And so I reconsidered what I started when from the Royal Commission. I thought, well, let's go back into practice. Maybe not full time, because I was like, let's ease my way back into normal work.
So tell us about what work you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, so I work between two roles. So I practice now as a family lawyer, a family barrister. And then I also work with MIT as the Student Advocacy and Appeals Advisor. So in a nutshell, I tell people I deal with their complaints and appeals.
And that sounds quasi-legal to me.
Yes.
Obviously, it's about decision making.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. It's sort of like a multifaceted role, actually. Like you have a close eye on some of the policies. So I'm obviously advising on that, and you deal with decision makers on some of the appeals and complaints that do come through. So very interesting. I had never imagined that I'd be doing that, but again, I had the right people in my circle who had approached me. Yeah.
What does success look like for you? What's your big goal now?
Yeah. Well, success truly is. I would say there is a sense of, people don't want to live to work for something. Like there is a thing in us where we feel like we need to pursue purpose. Like what were we born to do? Where were we meant to go? And I think people are driven by that need to figure out what is my purpose. And that's what success looks like to me. Doesn't look like earning, sorry, Kylie, but, being rich. Though it would be helpful. It would be helpful to be quite wealthy, but you want that sense of fulfillment. And that's what I sort of work towards when I look at what do I want to do next, where do I want to go. Does it give me a sense of purpose and of fulfillment? And that's the pathway that I follow. And I think that's what true success looks like.
Cool. I'm fully aware that the Pacific, Te Whananui-a-Kiwa, is full of many, many peoples and cultures, but I think I'm right in saying, particularly amongst Polynesian cultures, probably the core defining feature is service. And what role does service play in your life, work, purpose?
Yeah, I've seen it modelled my whole life, through my parents especially. But they really are the best role models for us to look to. And they are our first teachers, as some people would say. But I don't think I was a natural, I was natural in this area. I didn't really like the idea of serving other people or the idea of service. And my mum might be able to attest to that. But as you grow up, you do realize the value of it. And I heard recently in a podcast, authority is given for service. And so use it very well. Use it for good. That's at least what I think it should be used for. But service is beautiful. Like some people take it as, oh gosh, it depends what your idea of service looks like. And my idea of service, was nicely modeled by my parents. They were able to provide for me. The pathways to my success were built on their model of service, and I was not able to do what I could without that. So it really is, how do you think about, service? What does that look like? Because while it is a big thing for us Pacific, I've seen it in other circles as well, and people are learning that there is nothing to be afraid of when it comes to servant leadership or service. Yeah.
You've mentioned growing up in your early years in the Cook Islands. What is that on the horizon for you in terms of work, or what's your relationship with
with the islands?
Well, our biggest relationship is going back for a holiday every year. But I do have it in mind. I am thinking about the Cook Islands and what is obviously ever evolving sort of thing, and what's happening in the Pacific as well. So I wouldn't say that I've considered it that much, but I am thinking about it. Yeah.
What is the role of, professionally trained Pacific people like you in the diaspora who live in Aotearoa? What do you see your role if you're not, going to live there perhaps? How can you support the, safety, security, flourishing of the Pacific?
Yeah, well, I guess that'll come down to some of the conversation that you need to have with people who have influence in those different spaces. And I don't think I've yet considered it, but I am thinking about it now. Just haven't really put any detail to that. Yeah.
You've mentioned your mum and dad, and you've mentioned Judge Sharkey, and I'm presuming Judge Alofiwai.
Yes.
Let's whakamana some of your other mentors. Who are some people you've looked up to, that you maybe model yourself upon, whether they know it or not?
Yeah, whether they know it is the key. Actually, no, I have a few different role models, and I have mentors now that I look to, who I speak to actually as much as I can. But one including a pastor of mine who, late pastor actually, she passed away a couple of years ago now, but she was a huge supporter, encourager of life's purpose, basically, and she was like, go for it, you can do it. And so I always felt encouraged by her, and actually she's she would be one of the mentors that helped push me over the line to consider politics. But unfortunately, partway through that, she'd actually passed away. But that seed that she had planted in me had obviously continued to grow, and I thought I was so grateful for her. My number one would be my parents. So I won't go there because I probably talked about them quite a bit tonight. But yes, at the Royal Commission, because I thought, well, I haven't really had any interactions with much lawyers actually. So I really looked up to Judge Sharkey and Judge Alofiwai. At the time, she was a commissioner. And I thought, my goodness, just to be in their presence was amazing. And then I got the chance to meet Judge Ida as well. So I saw them recently all together at an event. So all three of them came walking in together, and I said to someone, I think it was with, Rosemary actually. Everyone meet Rosemary, who's here to support me. But I said to Rosemary, I said, oh my goodness, like if there's ever like a gang, not a literal gang, but like,
they're like Destiny's Child.
Yeah, Destiny's Child, like it would be them.
Yeah.
Like in the legal profession, they walked in and I was like, oh my gosh, and I know them.
Although Sandra would fight Ida to be Beyonce. Yeah.
Yeah, probably. But those three are just huge champions. They have a huge amount of experience behind them. But to have encountered them and worked with them actually at the Royal Commission, and now to see that they're judges, I'm like, with the exception of Judge Ida, of course, but it's incredible. So those three specifically in the legal profession for me. Yeah.
Now, you've done quite a few things already, so maybe close to our final question. If you weren't doing what you're currently doing, what's kind of your dream job? And it can be a realistic option, it could be Beyonce option, it could be NRL ref, who knows? What kind of job might you have if you weren't doing what you're doing now?
Oh, that's the hardest question of the night. I would default and say, man, I love what I'm doing right now, truly. But if I could choose something else, and it wasn't a job, I know you said a job, but I would, I would go on a holiday somewhere and take a good long break. Yeah.
What do you do for fun?
I hang out with my family and my friends a lot. But I love going on walks. I love road trips. I love going to cafes. That's our favourite thing to do.
Supporting the economy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Support small businesses too. So yeah, we do that every week actually. Yeah, and I'll fly to different places as much as I can. Yeah.
Favourite place you've been to so far?
Oh, I actually went somewhere recently in Methven, if anyone has heard of that place in the South Island, an hour and a half drive outside of Christchurch. Beautiful, stunning.
Did you go to the pools?
No, I didn't have time. I didn't have time. I didn't have time, but next time I will think about that. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kylie.
So I'm going to open up some questions to the floor. So I think Narisha over there has a microphone. So we're being recorded. So if you have a question, wait for Narisha, and so we can capture what you're going to say. So over to you. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Angee. Do you see the challenges, aspirations, and opportunities within the Pacifica ethnic communities any differently in South Auckland and West Auckland?
That's a really, really good question because I was raised in, thank you, William, because I was raised in West Auckland, and now this is actually the first time I've ever worked out in South Auckland. So both my roles, like I'm mainly in the Papakura and Manukau courts, and I also work at MIT, which is really just around the corner in Otara. Not really. I can see, in terms of the challenges or aspirations, people want to get ahead. Like young people are dreaming. I think it's harder for them to consider actually what are those pathways, or what could those pathways for me look like. Being quite new to South Auckland, I probably can't say too much, but I'm surrounded by a lot more Pacific Islanders, let's just say that, in the south. And so in that sense, it's very different. But I do hear from practitioners and just people living out here that there is a great need for Pacific. Yeah.
Those decisions, there's so much about studying law that is hard, and you've obviously navigated those waters really well. So much difficulty about the complexity of law, Mike French lectures, hard stuff. So I'm getting the sideways glance.
Yeah.
So look, I guess navigating that and finding work in the profession, one of the things that Mike actually said to me when I came to AUT is that only 50% of graduates go on to actually practice law. And you have applied your degree in so many varied ways, which is really wonderful. And I think that's something that, talking to other undergraduates or young people thinking about studying law, particularly people who haven't had a lot of exposure to law, could hear more about or learn more about. What are your thoughts about that in terms of, given that when you looked at what you were going to study and how you're going to study and the obvious encouragement you had from your parents, but then thinking, how would I apply it? Now that you've gone through that, what would you say to young students thinking about studying law?
Go for it. It is literally the bottom line. I would say go for it. I was, thank you, Mark, as well, former alumna. So please have a chat with him as well if he's open to it, sorry, I just pointed everyone towards you. But it's great to be able to hear directly from students if you are here and you are considering AUT Law. Yeah, absolutely go for it. Having, been quite reluctant at the start, I took a gap year because I was unsure. But I really admire people who, I've set my mind on a certain thing that I want to study and just did it. So that would be my first advice to myself. Even if I were to speak to myself, a few years back, to my younger self, that's exactly what I would tell her. But also, I've embraced my own journey of, I didn't go straight into legal practice, and that's okay. And there are various ways in which you can apply, as you've pointed out, Mark. What you've studied at AUT Law, you may not become a lawyer. We need more lawyers, right, Carly? But it's all in your hands.
What are the core skills that you learn in a legal degree that can be applied to other contexts? What if you were to say, if someone was to ask you what is it that you've learnt, whether you're going to practice or not?
Yeah.
How could you apply it in other contexts?
I think put very simply, you do become very familiar with different areas of the law. The application, I think, is the biggest thing that I've learned leaving AUT Law School is how does it affect people practically? How does the law affect people? And knowing how to apply that becomes really important when you're practicing, because you see the direct effects of some of the laws that are in place, whether it works or not, on, for example, in the family law space that I work, if it's working for them, if not, what should it look like? And it's been quite interesting, actually, having some experience in the legal industry and then also having gone into politics, you see the connection between the two. Yes. So. Was that correct? Because you're the Dean of Law, so I'm like, what are the outcomes? What are the outcomes that you're meant to learn?
I give that a high B, yeah.
Yeah, critical thinking.
I mean, it seems to me like one of those things that once you go down the path, there's no going back, whether you practice or not. You learn to think like a lawyer, you need to learn to write like a lawyer, you process information, and you communicate in quite direct ways. So would you say that's a fair representation of all of the different kinds of work that you've done? You've taken that with you?
Oh, totally. I wouldn't disagree with you. You're the dean, so. But it's true. I mean, having that understanding and going into different areas of, politics in the Royal Commission, you do need those skills. Critical thinking is massive because you have to problem solve. You problem solve for everyone. Even in my role right now, I'm in both roles actually at MIT and also as a family lawyer. You problem solve to the T, and sometimes the solutions that you have to advise your clients as best as possible. But sometimes they don't want to go down that route. And you have to deal with those, how do you, deal with these real life situations, but also making sure that you fulfill your role as a practitioner.
One of the things, sort of areas that we don't really teach students at university, in law schools at least, are the soft skills of being a good lawyer, outside of things like maybe interview skills and taking instructions, but the things that you've done, so family law, the Royal Commission, and even that piece at MIT in terms of managing, people who've come to you with a problem that they feel quite deeply about, and they're going to be quite distressed perhaps if things don't go their way, and that's probably, most law will have those kinds of encounters. So if you don't learn those things at university, how do you develop those things in yourself?
Well, learn to do it at home is the bottom line. Learn how to problem solve your own issues. And conflict resolution is a big thing for me now. I mean, mediating stuff, facilitating. Those soft skills become very, very important when you're dealing with people who are distressed, who come to you and will know nothing about some of the solutions that they need to. All pathways to some of those solutions. So they're really relying on you as almost like a caretaker, like for you to walk them through, know your stuff, but take care of them at the same time. So I know I laughed when I said it, but it's true. You've got to develop those soft skills with the people that are in your circle right now. Can you take up, what does your role look like now? Are you working or not? Like, just think about those things. It's very specific to who you are. Yeah.
Hi, Angee. I know that you will return back to politics at some stage. What do you want to achieve as a Pacifica future member of parliament? I know you will.
Thank you. Thank you, Solani. I'm gonna come back to Kylie's point around service, and right now, and obviously with my experience, like, what I look at this period of time as training ground, and what I can learn, and as much as possible from the different areas of work that I'm currently in. But I take this time as training ground, and if I were fortunate enough to become an MP, hopefully, number one, it's actually really important for you to know who works in the legal profession, or not just the legal profession, but it's who you know, who can you connect with within those different industries that will become quite critical, and it's what I learned during the campaign as well, because we won't know everything. That's just a good start as an MP. And number two is, well, actually not number two, I'm going to come back to Kylie's point around service, is I want to do the best job that I can. And if I actually get into the next elections, I can't really determine what portfolio I will have as a new MP or a backbencher. But whatever role I'm given, I'm going to make sure that I do that, and I do it really, really well. But I think as a Pacific person, I hope to inspire people. Let's just start there. I hope that I can inspire other young Pacific people, or not, to get into politics, because you are making some very big decisions on behalf of the people who have elected you to be there. And so for me, I want to see the right people there, and we obviously need a lot more Pacific in those spaces. What do I want to achieve? Well, I do want some specific portfolios, hopefully later down the track, but I'm not going to announce any of those publicly here. But like I said, Solani, when you're given a role or a task, you want to deliver. And that's exactly what I want to do as not just a Pacific MP, but as an MP, because people have an expectation that you will basically do what they ask and do it really well. If you can't, then obviously that needs to be admitted to. But one of the things that I learned on the campaign is that people have very high expectations of you. And sometimes you actually won't meet those expectations, but can you deliver on the main stuff that they are asking for? And essentially, some of the laws that we pass, we want to make sure that people have the ability to live their lives and have good lives, So I don't know if I answered your question, hopefully.
Can I ask a follow-up to that, which is that, your caucus currently doesn't have any Pacific MPs.
Yeah.
So do you have a role then outside of, the formally elected MPs to help guide your caucus on, basically the issues that were raised in the first question, what the challenges, what's relevant for Pacific peoples? Do you have a role outside of caucus to assist them in knowing those things?
No. No, as in it's not an official role. So we do have special interest groups, so advisors that can speak to obviously the different ministers and also the Prime Minister. In terms of a specific role, no. But we do stay engaged because it's really important, and I think people don't know how easy it sometimes is to connect with their MPs or their ministers. It's fairly easy, but you know, over this time, actually, we want to stay engaged, keep our finger on the pulse, because there are still some Pacific issues, of course, that we will speak to and will share with the party on. Yeah, you want to?
My next question is, you as a lawyer, and some of us who study the profession, what is your taking when politicians sort of like hammer the judiciary and just go without any considerations to the judiciaries and officer of the court and the work that they do? What, like, you know, you can be a lawyer today and then politicians tomorrow, and some people will come from other professions, become politicians. As lawyers, you will never, as what you know, Kylie was saying, you will always think like a lawyer, speak like a lawyer, absorb and analyze information like lawyers. And when you hear politicians sort of like, we're going to take that away from them, their decision making or whatever, and specifically target the judiciary, what's your taking as a lawyer?
I don't think politicians should be commenting on the judiciary, but I suppose just keep it nice and lighthearted. But I suppose, you know, being a family lawyer and having looked at some of the priorities, of course, for example, of the Justice Minister, I do think about actually the roll-on effects of that for us. And so I think about other practitioners and I think about how applicable or how helpful will some of these laws be to us. Is there any work that's going to be done in this area of the law, especially when it comes to the access to justice, and it is one of the priorities of the minister. So I guess for me it's more so, I'm more concerned about, okay, what changes will be made, how effective will that be on us, you know, practicing and dealing and having to apply the law. That's the kind of stuff that I think about right now. I'm not thinking about how they're communicating with the public. That's for them to deal with. I'm out of campaigning mode. Or, I don't know, some of the other issues, apart from how does it affect us in the legal profession. Anything else, I just ignore.
Any other questions?
Now, Angee, you're only a few years younger than, than some of us. But when I think about you going to AUT, and you were saying when it's hard, right? What is your drive, or what pulled you through those hard times?
Yeah.
Because there's, you know, back in my days, there was quite a lot of dropouts for Polynesian and Māori.
Yeah.
So to have a Pacifica, you know, graduate, that's awesome. But what drove you to that, to get you there when it's hard?
Thanks, Rosemary. A few different factors for me. One big one is my family, of course. The other one is just personally my faith. Really got me through. But I think also, William, you touched on this, around aspiring, you know, aspiring young people who want to do this, do that, or get in, you know, study law. That's one of the big factors for me, because I thought I want to be one of those specific people who walk across the stage and have graduated with their law degree. And that might sound strange to some, I think especially to the Pacific community, to say, yeah, I want to be one of the first people, you know, walking across that stage and feeling proud about it. But I really took that as something, as one of the factors to help me get through. And given my background as well, you know, having been born in the islands, I thought, how much cooler would it be for someone who was born in the islands, you know, to graduate with their law degree and being one of the first in the family to do that. So again, that was a sense of fulfillment and purpose that I come back to. Yeah.
so you can see. Hi. First of all, I just want to congratulate you in tackling your degree before you have kids. My question is specifically for myself. I am doing my business degree at the moment, halfway through there, and doing law, which I'm finding it really difficult at the moment. So what would you say, a mother of three, is it better off do it part-time or full-time? Like how did you, is there any advice that you can offer me at this stage? Because I'm finding it really challenging at the moment.
Maybe you can speak to that, Tom, could you? Yep. Thank you so much. I think let's start by saying well done with 3 kids. That is incredible, and you do deserve a hand clap for that. I can't speak specifically to your situation, and I mean, we do have a young one in our care, and it is hard. We've got 1, you've got 3, so I'm just like, oh. It is hard, but Kylie, maybe is there, for a student who may be finding it challenging, I think what I can say before I maybe hand over to Kylie is that I'm not sure if you've already done it or not, but see what support is available through the law school and also through the university. For me, I found it, I sort of spoke to it, but I found it really helpful to connect with the student associations. That's for me specifically. Don't know if they do childcare services, maybe not, but or AUT might offer that. Kylie, is there anything else you want to?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. You know, our mantra is always that not only do we want you to do well, but we want you to be well. And being well means taking account of, you know, your circumstances at this time. We have a huge number of mamas like you, so people with kids and other commitments outside of studies. And I think our core message is always, you know, get there in your own good time. There's no hurry. More than half of our students are not school leavers. So they're either people who are changing careers from one job to another, or people who have had their children, have been away from education for a really long time, which is another challenge. So going part-time is probably the best advice, and I can't tell you how many mums usually, because mums usually carry the can for childcare, so the number of times that mums have attempted to juggle all of it and study full-time, you're much more likely to get there in the long run if you take it as slow as you can. So I think that's probably take your own advice and think about going part-time, so that you don't have any regrets if everything implodes and you end up having to stop studying for a while. So slowly and surely. There was a question at the front, Narisha.
When you graduated from AUT, did you feel as though you were prepared to start practicing law like immediately? And also, what were the challenges that you faced when you were entering the workforce for law?
Yeah, I can't speak specifically to the first one because I didn't actually go straight into it. But I know a lot of, when I eventually did, yes, absolutely. Because I thought, wow, we've spent 4.5 years, I spent 4.5 years doing this. And what I found out, I didn't feel it at the time, but what I found out is actually some of those skills that you learned during law school are extremely helpful. I know some of the alumna from my cohort, they did things like clerkships, they had work experience already, whereas I didn't. And so that was helpful. And actually, I think we were quite standout because a lot of firms at the time, and I'm not sure if it's true, it probably is true today actually, were fond of AUT students because they felt like they came in with that practical view of how things actually worked. So that's definitely a key. What was your second question? I'm so sorry. Some of the challenges?
Yeah, it was. What were some of the challenges you faced when you first entered like the law workplace?
To be quite honest, you just need to get your feet in and learn the practice as you go. The only way is to get in and to learn how it all works. And for me, I'm very practical, and so when I started the Royal Commission, I thought, my goodness, I don't know why they chose me, because I have no legal experience up my belt. But actually, you learn those skills, the soft skills, but also those legal skills that you need in the workforce to be able to do really well. So just go for it.
You tapped into something that you may not know, which is interesting. The T in AUT stands for technology. AUT is the only university of technology in the country. And technology doesn't mean this stuff. Universities of technology around the world have a particular meaning to them. And it means that you get an education that is practical, and whatever program or degree you're studying, it has a connection to the workplace. So universities of technology have degrees, all of their programs have really strong workplace connections, which means so in law and in business and any other program here, there are lots of work placements. You have opportunities, as Angee said, to go clerk, but also to do things like shadow a leader or go and have relationships with people that work in the law. Really important I think that's a good thing for anybody, but really important for the kinds of people that come and study at AUT, particularly at our Manukau campus, and people like us who came from families where there were no lawyers in the family, or you didn't have those connections that perhaps other students might do. So you don't really know what it is that lawyers do. You don't really know what perhaps the options are in terms of practice or other non-practice things like Angee's done. So a University of Technology education is really good for that, because it means you can come from any background, any kind of family or community context, and once you start, you get a good view of what's going to be at the end. Because otherwise it'd be like, studying for something where you're not quite sure what the job's going to look like when you've finished, which you might have if you have family members or other people in your life who do that job. But if you didn't, like us, then it's really useful to, as soon as you start, this is what it might look like for you.
Yeah.
Kamotu, Narisha?
Oh, we've got one.
One more. Kia ora.
Thank you, Angee, for being here. I just want to ask that, given your vast experience and a lawyer perspective, what are your thoughts about the New Zealand economy at the moment?
It's a touchy one. From what perspective? Just generally, just based on my experience. Okay. Well, what I will say is that there's a lot of fixing to do, and not everyone will agree with that. But when you see the downward pressure on people who are struggling, you know that there's something out of kilter, right? Like there's something not quite working here, and so that's just my way of explaining. Actually, we need to make sure, for example, even if you look at a small business, our family run a small business, and the pressures that they face and they have faced over the last almost 5 years, some have gone out of business, no longer existing. And it's incredibly important, like I said, and we joked about it before, of going to the cafe, and it's one of my favorite things to do. And we are actually supporting not just a business. We are supporting, for example, that could be a family who have started, become entrepreneurs, who have set that up in the business 5 years. We are supporting a thriving and a growing economy. And I think at the moment, when you are hearing from too many people who are feeling the pressures of the cost of living crisis at the moment, but are also going out of business, for example, or who are moving overseas. That's not a positive outlook of obviously where we are headed. And so I think we do need to work on rebuilding that economy and making sure that people don't just look at overseas work as the prime thing for them, but they look at New Zealand and consider there are opportunities here where they can invest, they can, continue working, and that goes into building a really healthy, growing economy because more work is great. So a fair bit of work to do, but challenging. It's very challenging.
This is sort of a very subjective question.
Yeah.
But what do you think would be the most practical conjoint with a law degree?
Oh, Kylie, do you have any thoughts? Because I didn't do a conjoint. Go ahead.
I don't think there's no right or wrong answer to that question. Very common here for students to do a business or commerce style degree, but any other degree is useful and depends partly on your interests. I have an arts degree background, which is good in a broad social science sense. You could do science, you could do anything. It depends on partly what you've done at school and where you think you might be heading. So you say practical sense, but actually it's really where you're going to guide perhaps your practice of law. You may be interested in environmental law, so you might do a complementary science degree.
Yeah.
So it really kind of depends on where you think you might see yourself heading. But also other people also do a double or conjoint degree purely for interest. They see the law part as the hard thing they're going to do, and then they might want to do something fun. So they might do something complementary that's going to keep them happy for... Not saying that we're not going to keep you happy necessarily, but you might be happier doing something not quite as taxing. So there are a variety of reasons why you might do more than one degree.
And also, although I didn't do double degree or conjoint, there are opportunities where you could do a non-law paper, and I took that chance to consider, actually, where are my interests and what would I seriously thought about those non-law papers because I was like, what am I interested in and what would I choose? So, and some people switch partway through, like you don't have to, you can consider it a little bit later down the track if you really wanted to, because I know students in my cohort who did that. They went from standard bachelor's to a conjoint or double degree. Yeah.
Kia ora.
Oh, is it working?
Okay, good question. So the question for audio was, does the conjoint affect where you might go afterwards? Yeah. Not necessarily, because a law degree is quite well-rounded. There are elective options, but the basic core part of a law degree is the same, whether you study at AUT, Otago, or any of the other 5 law schools in the country. So the core is the same. The conjoint may be useful in terms of what direction you go, but it won't close any doors to you necessarily. Yeah, so it will only help.
You'll still be a standout student if you did law, that's for sure.
One last question. Oh, kia ora.
Kia ora, Angee. I just thought I would ask what I think is a relevant question, but you can tell me to butt out if you need to. In terms of the Indigenous thought leadership within the current national party, are we to assume that it's Mr. Tama Pōtaka himself, or is the tail of the dog being wagged by the minor parties on that?
Yeah, thank you, William. And probably a million more people thinking the same thing. But what I will say is that I think the starting point is I would love to see a lot more Māori and Pacific within the National Party, and it is changing. I would never have thought that I'd consider the National Party until obviously I got to know a few people within the party. But party politics is interesting because there is a certain line that you have to draw when it comes to party politics, and a sense of almost teamwork, I would call it. And what we see at the end of all those decisions and conversations that may happen in the background, and many of us are not privy to that, we don't really know what people think unless you talk to them. I would encourage people to actually speak to those MPs specifically. If they want to get a real grip, they may tell you straight up what they think about a certain issue. But we have to, I think most people, and I'm not bagging on the public, but I think most people just don't understand how party politics works. And having gone through the campaign, it's a tricky thing to navigate. It doesn't mean that you can't hold your own opinions, because like I said, there are conversations that go on that we don't ever, and we may never get to hear, about what people think on a certain issue. So, you know, maybe watch that space and see, I suppose we need to give the current government a chance to prove themselves. Right, they've made a few commitments to the public around what they want to deliver. And one thing I also realized, just to step back from the specifics of politics, is that when I won, I didn't think, oh my gosh, I won, I'm a Pacific MP. No, when I won, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm an MP. And I represent not just my Pacific community, you know, the Cook Island community, we're incredibly proud. The Pacific community, we're really happy. But I also had, because I'd won my electorate, I had people within the community that were proud of me. And they were like, she's going to be the one who's going to speak for me. And so I think we need to be mindful of that when we look at ministers. We may not always agree with them, and actually there's a lot of disagreement that may take place, you know, in the background, and that's okay. Because for us to be able to, you know, deliver on things that are going to affect you and me, we need to be open to those robust conversations, and they do take place. Believe me when I say that. So that didn't answer your question, you know, directly, but you know, it would be great if we could see a lot more Māori and Pacific MPs in the next election cycles get in, because, yeah, we need it. It's a growing population.
Coming soon to a billboard near you,
Coming soon.
maybe?
Yeah, come to Te Atatū, West Auckland. Yeah.
Well, I think we'll leave it there, and any other questions we can have. I'm sure you're going to stay for a bit, and we'll finish the drinks and food before we go. But can I just say thank you again so much for joining us. Thank you all for coming out tonight, and let's give Angee a hand. Kia ora. Thank you.
Is that us?
Nice.
Thanks, everyone.